Last year, journalists at Associated Press revealed that the New York Police Department had placed the city's Muslim communities under a near-constant surveillance. Working with the CIA, undercover officers infiltrated student groups, videotaped mosque-goers and collected their license plates when they prayed. An entire community has been singled out for a threat for no other reason than it's Muslim. Hello and welcome to Eyewitness with me, John Rees. Well, after a 3-month review, New Jersey's Attorney General has concluded that the police have acted lawfully, provoking anger from both Muslims and civil liberties campaigners. Spying on Muslim community groups and student organisations has also been widespread here in the UK. In today's show, we'll be looking at how far these controversial tactics infringe on our civil liberties and what can be done to challenge them. First, though, here's a report from Alex Crutcher filling us in on what's been happening in New York.
The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 sent a chilling message to the people of New York. The national intelligence agencies could not be depended on to guarantee the safety of their city. In the aftermath of the atrocities, the New York Police Department set about transforming their own capacity for intelligence gathering with the help of the CIA. But last year, journalists at the Associated Press revealed that over the last decade, the department had carried out an aggressive and extensive surveillance operation against the city's Muslim community. All of this was done with no evidence of criminal or terrorist activity, but simply because they were Muslim. According to the report, the NYPD became one of the nation's most aggressive domestic intelligence agencies, targeting ethnic communities in ways that would run afoul of civil liberties rules if practiced by the federal government. The report told of how officers of ethnic minority background were drafted out of the police academy and sent undercover into Muslim neighborhoods. Hanging out in libraries, cafes and mosques, they eavesdropped on conversations, made note of car registration numbers and pinpointed individuals and businesses to be monitored. They built a network of informants, infiltrated student groups, and in one instance set up a fake youth camp to glean intelligence. These alarming practices suggest that the racist profile of Muslim equals terrorist is becoming increasingly ingrained in law enforcement agencies. Indeed, in January, it emerged that police recruits were being shown this film, The Third Jihad, an Islamophobic tirade that claims Muslims are attempting to take over and destroy the United States. The journalists were also alarmed by the unprecedented help the operation received from the CIA. The Central Intelligence Agency is only supposed to spy on foreign targets, but this had become a partnership that blurred the lines between foreign and domestic spying. A 3-month investigation was subsequently launched by the New Jersey Attorney General, Jeffrey Shadjareh. But last Thursday he concluded that the NYPD had acted lawfully. Muslim communities are now furious. They not only have no recourse to address this injustice through state law, but fear that it sets a dangerous precedent for other law enforcement agencies.
Well, I'm joined in the studio today by Massoud Shadjareh, who's chair of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, and joining us on the line from New York, I'm also pleased to welcome Fahd Ahmed from the Desis Rise Up and Moving, a civil society action group fighting for immigrant rights. Welcome to the programme, both of you. Fahd, first, let me just bring you straight in here. Were you astounded that this level of surveillance could be declared legal this week?
Yes, the New Jersey Attorney General, which would be the highest-ranking attorney in that state, did a 3-month investigation on the recommendation of the New Jersey governor and concluded that there was nothing illegal about the spying operation. First sort of a preliminary question is we're not quite sure whether he just focused on the jurisdiction issues, which is whether the NYPD can go into another state and spy, or whether he also included the substantive issues of spying on communities without any suspicion or evidence of wrongdoing. So far, their statements seem to indicate the latter, But the NYPD's own documents proved that sort of conclusion to be wrong when they surveilled communities broadly and everybody without citing any form of suspicion.
Were you surprised? I mean, the AP report that began all this, it was a Pulitzer Prize-winning report in the end, wasn't it? Were you surprised by the extent of the surveillance that it uncovered?
The knowledge of the surveillance itself was definitely not a surprise to us. We've been working in New York City for the past 12 years, and immediately after 9/11, we had started seeing the first evidence of law enforcement going into communities and trying to recruit informants to collect information and to spy on communities. But I think the extent of it, the breadth and the depth of it, is somewhat surprising. And the involvement of the CIA was, I think, definitely the more surprising aspect of it.
Massoud, let me bring you into the discussion here. I mean, this scale of surveillance looks like something which is considerably larger in extent than it would be in this country.
Well, not really. I mean, I think we need to go back to the philosophy why we're getting these. The fact is this, that the intelligence agencies and anti-terror sort of business or trade is after 9/11 have been given sort of basically clean checks, to just write up how much they want to spend, and they need to justify. So we've got huge shift of resources going into these institutions, and no one is really asking them to account for it. I mean, we're not asking these intelligence agencies that to justify why they want these things. If we do that, we don't end up with this sort of process. And even in this country, we had the Birmingham situation. We have the whole CCTV sort of being set up to read and recognize faces and read number plates, basically putting an electronic sort of fence right around where the Muslim community lives. And this was done without consultation, and the finances was very similar to the case of United States. Finance came from central government through Prevent and so forth. Even Prevent itself, we had children in nursery being investigated for possible terrorist tendencies and reported. I mean, these are outrageous. And even in this country, we've got the same problem as in the United States, the MI6 and MI5 being involved in sort of all levels of rather than being just institutions that should be looking after international sort of investigation. They're involved with the police. We even have had the cases of army being involved. I mean, right now we're coming to Olympics. We've got army actually is going to be given sort of authority to actually police central London. We've got rocket launchers being set on the top of the buildings. I mean, I really couldn't believe this. If 10 years ago somebody sort of came and said, one day in London we're going to have rocket launchers just to secure for Olympics, I would say, you must be joking. What sort of planet do you come from? But these are all becoming realities because of the fact that this is being justified on the back of Islamophobia. Really, I mean, this creation of others, Muslims are others, doesn't affect me. It's like saying we're going to tax every millionaire, 80%. If you're not a millionaire, it doesn't affect you because you could benefit from it. You could assume that, you could presume that. But the reality is once civil liberties goes, it goes and it doesn't come back. And I'm extremely concerned that in this country, in the United States, and indeed right across the world, because most of these anti-terror processes are not just for one geographical area. They're being promoted by United States. They go around even in the Muslim countries and actually enforcing these policies to be adopted. We've seen the same thing in places like South Africa and Australia, New Zealand, etc., etc. These policies, which is based on demonization of others, i.e. Muslims and Islamophobia, is now becoming norm rather than exception. And this actually creating huge amount of problem because ordinarily we all are concerned about terrorism. None of us want to be blown up or our family to be blown up. If a bomb goes out in London, it's not going to differentiate between Muslim or non-Muslim, lefties or righties and so forth. It's going to kill all of us. So, of course, we're all stakeholders on this. But these policies actually alienating the very people who should be united against a concept and actually disuniting us, because they're not explaining why should ordinary innocent people who have nothing to do with terrorism be investigated in this way. And this is, I think, the really a big problem with it.
Fahd, let me come back to you. Were you surprised at the relationship here between the CIA and the New York Police Department in this operation? Because, as Massoud was saying here, that's the security services and the police cooperate here. But isn't this outside the CIA's jurisdiction?
Yes, according to United States law, the CIA is not supposed to be engaged in any domestic operations. They've tried to skirt around the issue and say, well, they weren't directly involved, they were just providing some technical assistance. But regardless of whether that's true or not, the involvement of the CIA itself is very, very disturbing. If I could add a couple of glosses on Brother Massoud's comments.
Of course.
The idea that they keep justifying these things in order to continue their funding. One of the things that we've sort of been outspoken about in New York is that it's not just a passive form of surveillance. It's not just that they're sitting around and watching people, seeing who's going to the masjid, listening to what people are saying, but they're actually going in and creating destructiveness within the community. So whether that is, stopping cab drivers and asking them, what masjid do you go to? Whether it is going to somebody's home and telling them, why don't you work for us? And if they refuse, then intimidating them or harassing them or following them around in dark unmarked cars. Or it is, sending in informants into political organizations or outspoken leaders to try to catch them in something. And then the very extreme case is the issue of entrapments, which is the informants go in, they're not only collecting information, but they're acting as agent provocateurs. And particularly with young men, many of whom have mental, emotional, or mentally and emotionally unstable, provoking them into saying things or doing things. And then as soon as they say something, they arrest them and say, look, we busted this major plot. And then that last phase of that cycle is what ends up justifying all the policies and all the funding that goes into these programs, because they can point to them as success stories. And they very actively use those as propaganda to say that, look, we have to do these programs, and these are the results of it. These are the successes of it. Yes. So
it looks as if the kind of the state appeal has failed. Is there a federal appeal that can be launched against this kind of operation?
Well, this was just an investigation by the Attorney General. There are some people are looking into lawsuits, both in New York and in New Jersey. There is a process for a federal investigation by the Department of Justice, but that is very difficult to be able to trigger one of those investigations. At this point, people have made those calls, but have not taken that on as an active campaign to really pressure the Department of Justice. So I think there's, over the next month or two, there'll be some re-strategizing and trying to think about what are going to be our options and what are the ways we're going to approach this.
Massoud, I mean, you mentioned the Prevent Violent Extremism program, which was the program launched under Labour, under which umbrella the whole process of sort of gathering intelligence in the Muslim community was conducted. Now that ran into problems, really. I mean, it virtually collapsed as a sort of legitimate program towards the end of the Labour government, and the Tories said they were going to get rid of it. But it looks as if we're back with kind of son of Prevent from the Tories.
It's been revived again, and you see the problem goes back to what I was saying. On one side you've got people from human rights perspective like ourselves and civil liberties who are pushing and saying, look, whatever you want to do in preventing acts of terrorism needs to be justified. It cannot be just you just can't give you clean sheet. You just write your own hymns, and from other side, there is another voice of intelligence agencies and so forth. They're saying that the only way we could operate is that you trust us and you give us all the powers and don't ask any question. Now, I think these two positions need to merge somewhere, that we need to have some justification. Because at the end of the day, when as an ordinary innocent person, like myself or anyone else, is put through this process and they're losing their civil liberties, they're being abused, etc., want to know why I have been through that process. Be it the fact that you've been stopped at the airport or you're investigated elsewhere, it needs to be justified within the concept of intelligence gathering, and it needs to be justified by intelligence agencies and the government. At the moment, that is not the case, neither here or United States. And what we are seeing, and the brother was talking about, these agents are actually provoking people and entrapping people into saying things and acting things, and most of it is hearsay. And we were young once. When you're 16, 17, 18, it's not all there. You could be, a lot of people get provoked. And right now in our Muslim community, we have a lot of youngsters who actually want to be halal 007s, and really they could be provoked, and they could be actually enticed into saying things which probably they don't even believe themselves, but it will actually not only end up in court, but end up in prison. Now we are actually gone beyond people being arrested and put in prison because of what they done, is on what they have thought or what they have sent emails on, giving their ideas. I mean, it wasn't long ago when a young girl writing a poem on back of a till receipt find herself in court being found guilty and put in prison. This sort of concept really should have no place in our society, and it doesn't serve any purpose. And unless we come together and recognize that and actually say that somehow the intelligence agencies and apparatus are out of control, and they need to be controlled by the rest of us for the benefit of all of us. And until that happens, I don't see any way forward.
Fahd, what's the kind of reaction in the Muslim community and among civil liberties campaigners been to this? Do you think that there's going to be a strong campaigning reaction, even if the legal process has proved recalcitrant?
There will be a reaction and a sustained campaign. I'm not sure if I can, if I'm hopeful enough to qualify it as, very, very strong. We are fighting an uphill battle here. As Brother Massoud said, part of the environment that has been created as a result of the policies of the last 11 years, as a result of the foreign wars, it really has, shifted the climate in the country to where, we can't say that, people on our side are opposing people from within the civil rights communities are opposing us, but they tend to think twice before they speak out. Part of it is a result of Islamophobia, but part of it, extends also much far beyond that. And we're starting to see the expansion of these policies and these tactics, again, into the activist communities. They have already been ongoing in Black and Latino and immigrant communities. So while the Islamophobia is one aspect of it, just the growing police state is a larger trend. And just as a society at this point, the resistance to it is still building, but not where it should be.
Fahd, do you think that's as true as it was? Because we're 10 years past the beginning of all this. Do you feel that there's any lessening of this, or any greater space for the kind of civil liberties argument? Do you think that there's a greater space for it outside New York, where perhaps you might expect the kind of feeling after 9/11 to be most intense? And finally, do you think it's changed because the wars themselves are now almost as unpopular, I think, in the United States as they are here in Britain, according to the opinion polls?
It's hard to measure that. I think our general assessment is that things are actually worse now than they were immediately after 9/11. While there was a visceral reaction after 9/11, there was also significant parts of society that were saying, look, we need to be thoughtful, we need to be careful, we need to figure out how we're going to solve through this together. But 10 years of wars. Wars have never, ever in history led to, progressive thought, and they only sort of cause more reactionary thought within society and create a more reactionary environment. And 10 years of foreign wars in multiple countries have created an environment to where a lot of people, even if they may be opposed to the wars themselves, do buy into the notion, that there is some unknown lurking threat, and that we need to exchange our security for our civil rights. I think there are more people that are willing to do that at this point than there were post 9/11. Some others may disagree, but I just felt like there was more of a discourse against it across society 10 years ago.
Massoud, I mean, there's certainly an irony this week in this country, isn't there? Because the Levinson inquiry is going on, and the Levinson inquiry is all about the unacceptability of hacking, of surveillance, of the newspapers, the collusion of the state and the media over precisely the kind of surveillance which seems to be now routine and acceptable when it's directed at the Muslim community.
Yeah, and what is really unacceptable is that we don't hear about the impact of the media on Muslim community, which actually has been much worse than what has been on the rich and famous, and none of that is being sort of discussed. That is really, I think I agree with Fahd. The situation is much worse now. I mean, almost the concept of others have actually been established. Now we sort of almost established. And I think the civil liberty organizations like ourselves, those of us who are standing up for civil liberties, we need to explain it to masses, not just to converted, that losing this liberties actually goes far beyond what impact is going to have on the minority groups like the Muslims and others. Look at the impact of the way that the police is behaving towards 99% movement in the United States. The way they're behaving, they would never have behaved 10, 15 years ago. So what happens is once you lose your civil liberty, every single one of us, despite our color, religion, or creed, are going to be affected. And only then we could actually sort of combine everyone to come on board and actually try to reverse the process that has taken place in the last 10, 15 years.
And what do you think? What do you think are the most critical points that should be now put out to a wide public on these issues?
Well, the fact that it really affects all of us, either directly or indirectly. Any ill in our society is going to affect us. We're living in a global village, and when you behave badly in one way, it will affect on everyone else. And also, I really think that it's very important, fundamentally, that the security apparatus and the police and others need to be accountable to us. Yes, I understand there is an issue of secrecy and intelligence, but really we move far beyond that. It's become an excuse that, they just say, oh, it's an issue of security and intelligence, and then we all have to shut up and they just get on to do what they want. But also, I would say that, this battle cannot be fought any longer. I don't personally think it could be fought on a national basis. We really need to build international relations between one another. We need to take these sort of abuses to UN. And when it comes to UPR and countries like United States actually have to address their human rights record, these things need to be flagged up, and we need to work on that.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. My thanks to Massoud and to Fahd for joining us. As always, we want to hear what you think on this story, so please do get in touch. You can find us on Twitter @EyewitnessComment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.